This podcast is a quest for well-being, a quest for a meaningful life through the exploration of fundamental truth. Enlightening ideas, insights on physical, mental, and spiritual health. The inspiration is love. The aspiration is to awaken new ways of thinking that can lead us to a new way of being well. Welcome to Body, Mind, and Soul Healing Conversations.
For the most part, the problem is not bad people in healthcare. It is that good people are working in a lousy system that needs to be made safer with more checks and balances, communication, empathy, and oversight. Patients, family members, and advocates need to recognize and have the confidence to fight, question everything, and double-check on decisions made by those in charge. When you are sick, you feel like you have lost control. That is why you are the patient. The reality is, you do have some control, just as those who advocate for you do. Let them help you. You do not have to go it alone. Valeria interviews Melissa Mullamphy. She's the author of Not in Vain, A Promise Kept. Melissa Mullamphy is a master's-level psychologist, a healthcare expert and advocate, and critically acclaimed author. Beginning her working life at age 14, she did everything from filling grocery bags to playing in an all-girl heavy metal thrash band, to selling lottery tickets. Always busy, ever searching for ways to improve and to help others, she received her master's degree in counseling psychology, working in a psychiatric emergency room, leading various nonprofit events, and running group therapy sessions gave her an insider's view of the healthcare system and the failings and how it was run, not to mention the pay scale, finally turned her to the corporate world. Working as a domestic operations manager for one of Warren Buffett's firms, she spent the next 2 decades traveling the country in limousines and airplanes, enjoying fine dining and becoming a responsible adult, all of which came to a screeching halt when her mother was diagnosed with cancer, thrusting her back into the world of healthcare on the other side of the equation. Caring for her mother through her terminal illness, Mullamphy got an up-close view of the failings and bad practices of the medical system. She saw evil in the neglectful and incompetent people skimming along with the healthcare structure that preferred almost everything over the patients, and witnessed heroism in good people trying to do their best to help in a system they knew was hopelessly broken. After her mother's death, Mullamphy turned her life's experience as a psychologist, a corporate manager, and survivor of a failed medical system to advocacy, arguing in books, articles, and blogs about the sometimes deadly failures of our healthcare systems. She highlights failures, points out successes, and advocates for change in our most critical and critically deficient medical procedures and organizations. Meet Melissa at melissamullamphy.com. Here's the interview with Melissa Mullamphy.
In your own words, who is Melissa Mullamphy?
I am a daughter, a sister, a mother, and an ally. I would also say that I'm a patient advocate. I'm a forever student, and my passions are my son, my animals, and, as of late is trying to help people find their voice in healthcare.
When I hear you speak and then you talk about your son and the animals, so I think about connection, loving connection, powerful connections. I'm not a mother, but I thought about my dog immediately. It's unconditional love. Right?
Oh, yeah.
It's so beautiful. So I have lots of questions for you here, other questions. The second would be, why do you feel we suffer? What causes human beings to suffer?
I think that everybody has their own perspective on their outlook on life. Everybody has different expectations of others and then of themselves. I think that we suffer as a society because, we may feel that we don't have our sort of slice of the pie and others do. I think that, sometimes, if you're talking about current events, technology adds to a lot of suffering, especially with teenagers and mental health and, trying to fit in the mainstream media. If you've ever put the news on, no matter what channel it is, it's usually 90% of it is bad news. And there's some things that we can control, and we can control how we respond to them, but there's other things that are beyond our control.
Caught my attention for when you said about control, what is in our control and what's not. Do you believe that, or do you think that most of the things that are not under our control are the ones that cause the most suffering?
I would absolutely agree. In my circumstances, I'll just be completely transparent. When my mom was diagnosed with cancer, when we initially took her to the emergency room, I was playing doctor, and I thought, my mom was waiting tables the night before. There was no way that we were going to hear the cancer word. I thought, if anything, it was an obstructed bowel, something like that. We were not prepared to get that diagnosis. And, because it was all of the 8 months of what happened to her was outside of our control, you feel helpless, and the patient feels helpless, because there's not a lot you could do except try your best to support them in their decisions and, make them comfortable and that kind of thing. So, yeah, I think things that are outside of our control are the hardest.
Yes, it really makes sense to me when looking from that perspective. And at the same time, it's something that this is a practice that we talked briefly off record. It's a spiritual practice, kind of surrendering to love and being at peace, especially with the things I can't control.
Mm-hmm.
That's one of my biggest practices, which is basically surrendering everything. Because if we really think about it, we are not in control of pretty much anything.
Yep.
Right, Melissa? Anything could change. We are talking here now, and then, I don't know, I could lose the body, you too. So many things could happen that we never imagined. So it's one of it's almost like life goals, is to kind of cultivate inner peace every moment, and just to be at peace with everything that's happening and around me. But of course, and as I said to you also off record, I've never experienced what you did, losing somebody that I was very attached to.
Mm-hmm.
So I have to ask you this question. I appreciate if you can be open. So do you have any spiritual understandings of life, of yourself?
I do meditate. I meditate every night. As far as religion, my sister and I were not brought up in any kind of strict, go to church every Sunday, CCD, any of that stuff.
Yeah.
But, we believed in God and, heaven and all that kind of stuff. But quite frankly, in some cases, I wish that I had more understandings of these things, because I think that it would help, navigate, especially when you're navigating through high stress.
Right.
But,
right.
I definitely have spirituality, of something better, of something different, and hope that, both my parents are gone now. So, there's that hope that they're together and they're happy and they're out of pain. Yeah. So, I have some, I try to, learn about stuff. I read books. Again, I meditate. I even have my son meditate, but that's the most of it.
Right. Yeah. Meditation is a wonderful tool, though. It's really an experience. I know it sounds very abstract when somebody talks to us about this. And I remember listening to so many talks and doing so many spiritual retreats and all that, and just like an intellectual understanding. And that was just it. Just, I understand. But really was not living it. I could never experience that.
Right.
But then it became an experience over and over again. And that's when everything changed. You see life completely different.
I do believe in like signs and stuff like that. Like the other day I was looking out my window and I saw 2 red cardinals fly by, I was driving my son to school today. I saw a turkey, out on the road, I definitely believe in signs and stuff like that.
Yes, right. So in those cases, it's beautiful because it's almost like we are seeing more of what is there to see. And that's basically what it is when we get to the point of getting deeper into this what we call spirituality, which is really knowing the nature of who we are. And then we start seeing nature. Wait a minute. We start seeing things that we've never seen before out of nowhere. It's because we kind of lose this narrow focus on things that we're used to. It's pretty much being programmed to.
I completely agree.
Right. We're more open, spacious.
Yep. And if, in fact, somebody said to me years ago, you're not going to start to see some of these signs unless you get rid of your anger. And that's exactly what happened is, once I was able to get rid of my anger, things got better for me.
Yes, Melissa. And, those expressions, those are feelings, emotions, as you know, as a psychologist, I have another platform that I talk to you by email, The Freedom to Feel. That's a video platform that I talk to people like yourself. And then it's all about, the message is exactly that, just being open to our own feelings. If it is anger, hate, whatever it is, sometimes they're charged and very powerful. But it's being open to that too. Let them come to you and go, just seeing them passing, because that's their job, really. They have to express themselves. So I see emotions almost like entities, almost like, a little piece of existence. They exist too. It's almost like, not a human, of course, not in a human form, but they are forms.
Right.
So I kind of respect them all and let them just be. But behind all that, if it's getting in the way of a physical, emotional, mental health, then it means that fear is taking over and we are being driven by fear and not love.
Yeah, I definitely allowed my feelings to take over both my physical and mental health for many years. And I learned from it.
Yeah, that was exactly my case too. And it seems to me like at some point, we just get tired of those things, of being kind of led to places and situations, right? And then
it's work. It's work to be mad all the time. It is. It's, I've told, my son's a preteen now, and, sometimes they have little upsets at school, and, I try and teach them to just, let stuff go. It's so much harder to stay angry. It's almost like work.
Yes, it's heavy. It is heavy. And that's what I learned, my practice. When they come, I just let them be. I just kind of give them more space, and then it becomes lighter. But they're still here, but it becomes much, much lighter. It seems like that's what they want in a way, space. They just want to be as well. And sometimes we contract them so much, trying to push them away and escape them, that they become actually...
That's when you get in trouble.
Yes, very uncomfortable.
Yep.
So talk to me about the main intention of writing your book, Not in Vain, A Promise Kept.
Basically, my mom was diagnosed with ovarian cancer in 2010. It was actually May 1st, 8-month battle from diagnosis to passing. And unfortunately, the journey had a lot of medical mistakes. While my mom was very sick, and I don't know whether she would have survived it or not, a lot of medical mistakes made her suffer more. Right. When she passed away, of course, I was very angry. I was taking benzodiazepines. I was about 115 pounds soaking wet, from just anxiety and just from 8 months of nonstop going to the hospital and doing this and doing that. And, the reason for me writing my book was, as we talked about earlier, the first couple versions were almost unreadable. It was like an angry daughter that just lost their mom. Right. It took me years to be able to put the pen to the page and make something that is both factual, but as well as giving back to the reader of, each chapter ends with what I learned, what I would do differently, and what I suggest that you do if this happens to you or your family. Because, my goal in writing the book, is not to become rich or make money on selling books. It is 100% to, and that's what I've done since then, is to try and just help people understand how healthcare works, and also understand how they can advocate for themselves or others, and to reduce the probability of people going through what me and my family went through.
So you talk about choices that we have, the rights that we have. There are so many in the book, so many advice, suggestions you give, so many of them. But I love open questions because then it becomes very clear what the goal, what the purpose is of our message in the work we do. So I guess I would ask you something else that related to that. And then I have all the notes here that I'll go through them too. But regarding suffering, the suffering, which I call unnecessary suffering that your mother went through,
right?
You clearly saw that the system, the healthcare, the medical system, they were making one mistake after another.
Right.
What do you attribute that to, those mistakes?
It's tough to say because, after just going through what I went through with my dad at the end of 2022, I would have thought things have gotten better. And, I look at healthcare as both art and science, and also keeping in mind that the people that are treating you are also human beings, and human beings make mistakes. So, as far as some of the things that happened, some of them were just, an oops. And oopses happen. We all do it. It's just part of life. We're all human. We all make mistakes. But in my mom's case, some of the oopses were so bad that it led to suffering that was unnecessary and quite frankly almost killed her. She was poisoned with chemotherapy. And, what do I attribute that to? I attribute it to just how our healthcare is in the U.S. I attribute it to high patient loads for doctors, people making mistakes, nurses, if you're an inpatient, they come to your room maybe once an hour for maybe 5 minutes. There's just so many things that could go wrong when you're in that kind of setting, and especially if you're an inpatient. As far as now with mistakes, in a post-COVID world, where most of our hospital settings are understaffed, the nurses who I think are the connective tissue. Without nurses, hospitals don't work. Right. They're burnt out, they're tired. Right. Many have PTSD from COVID, and because they had to be the connective tissue of dying loved ones and their families, which is not what they signed up to. Right. Some of them are working 3 shifts in a row. And, under those kind of pressures, mistakes are going to happen, but that doesn't make them okay. It's sort of like an environment that no matter what, mistakes are going to happen, but it's the severity of the mistake that needs to be analyzed, and accountability, in my opinion, needs to be had.
Of course, it seems like the whole system needs to be revised. Yeah. It needs to be remodeled. When I hear you in the messages in your book, the things that you have learned, and I went through the notes, there's so many things that caught my attention. But hearing you speak now as well, what comes to me when you say accountability, you see all the issues we have in society. I mean, pretty much all of them. It wouldn't be non-existent if we took accountability for our own health and our own happiness as well as individuals. I think we give too much our own power to. Yeah. Right? Yeah, we just eat unhealthily and we just, whatever. Now when I get sick, I'll go to the doctor. Yep. And then we overload the medical system.
You're absolutely right. I mean, when the last 3 weeks of 2022, I would walk through the emergency room to get to my dad's room, and it was full. I mean, just not even standing room. And, it's because people are going to ERs to see if they have COVID or not, instead of going to like an urgent care, a clinic, their general practitioner. Right. And the problem with that is that, the heart attack coming in on the ambulance is delayed, so right now things are overburdened. And as far as my mom, I write about in the book, she wasn't a doctor person. She had some illnesses as a child, and, she had a fear of doctors. So, after she had me, she never went back to a gynecologist, and she got diagnosed when I was 39 years old. So that just was my mom. That's her generation. They're called the silent generation, and it's because they're not doctor people. My father wasn't a doctor people person until he had to be. The other thing with ovarian is there's no early detection. So my mom presented in the ER with a distended belly, which I didn't see because she wore extra large sweatshirts. Right. had I seen her,
Yeah.
in a t-shirt, I would
Yeah.
have said, Mom, what the heck is going on?
Right.
But, I think she was scared and she didn't want to face it.
Well, I do see even when we treat ourselves in a, let's say, unkind way by eating the
Mm,
foods we eat, by not sleeping well, by overworking, and whatever, so many things that we do to mistreat our own selves. I see that fear is very much at the base of that too. We're afraid of so many things. So self-care, self-love, that it really goes back to that, Melissa, every time I hear those things. But I have to say that I'm not a doctor person myself as well.
mm,
I have to say that here because I'm not. But I do take care of myself really well. I watch
yeah.
what I eat. I eat twice a day only. I try avoid eating too much for
Mm.
that reason too, because I know it can cause a lot of the food, even if it is healthy, could cause a lot of problems.
Oh,
So I
yeah.
try the water. I'm very mindful with everything I do, the work that I do.
That's huge because, I have, since I started this journey, since my book was released in 2021, I've befriended, hundreds and thousands of people that with Me Too stories, that my mom had the same experience, or my dad, or my sister. And there's one gal that I met in Florida who's incredible. She has stage 4 ovarian. She went to the Mayo Clinic, which you can't really go to a better place for treatment.
Mm.
And she has the type like my mom had, which is a sarcoma, which is a rare type. And she is beating it with diet. She is starving the cancer. She
Right.
got rid of any sugar,
Right.
any
Right.
carbs. And,
Mm.
I don't want to jinx her, but she's over a year out and she is cancer free. She, when you have stage 4 ovarian, that's equivalent to having pancreatic. She's truly a miracle. And I've told her, you got to share your message because, she's an example of self-care, diet,
Yes.
sacrifice, and she's doing great. It's amazing.
Yes, I love to hear that. And with that in mind, are you taking care of yourself too?
Yeah,
I have to ask
I
that,
definitely,
Melissa.
do. I mean, I've had my issues over the past 10 years, but nothing too crazy. I don't eat a lot either. I'm not a junk food eater. Because my mom had 4 different sarcomas, I got a hysterectomy in 2015 because I never wanted to go down the route that she went after I had my son, my miracle son at 39 years old. I definitely try my best.
I wanted to ask you almost immediately when we met today, but then I waited until now. I just came to me, ask her now. So let's see, questions for you. Oh, I made so many notes here. The things you talk about, the dedications. I love the dedication of the book. Of course, you say in loving memory of my mom, Constance
Yeah.
E. Burns. And the way you talk about her too. I love the way you talk about her here. You say that she was a giver. My mom was a giver in all ways. She always put everyone before herself. I look back now and I realize that it is part of why she got so sick.
Yeah.
It's beautiful the way she was, and at the same time, let's say not helpful, right, to herself. So, what is your message for us, especially women who give too much and to others and not to ourselves?
It's funny that you ask because that is the reason why my title is Not in Vain a Promise Kept is, one night my mom and it was after work, it was about 9:30 and she was in a cardiology unit because she had bilateral pulmonary embolisms and DVTs behind her knees. That's big words for blood clots. Cancer causes clots. So she was in cardiology. I stopped after work. And to make a long story short, we were there for about an hour and a half. And there were some mistakes that happened that night that I write about in the book. But she said to me, she said, Melissa, don't ever be like me. She goes, if you're sick and something's wrong, don't wait. Don't be like me. Don't allow this to happen to you. And then, after some other things happened, at one point, the gynecologist asked if they could use my mother's case for a white paper. And my mother, of course, said yes, if it's going to help people. And, she told me, tell the world my story to help others. My mom was always that way. I mean, she was 68 years old and since I was 1 year old, she was waiting tables at night. And
Wow.
even the night before we went to the emergency room, she was carrying around trays of spaghetti. That was the type of person that she was, with this big 23 centimeter mass in her abdomen. She was still working, so sometimes, like, my husband will say to me, you got to take care of yourself. You have to, I'm definitely an empath, and sometimes it's a good thing, but sometimes it's a bad thing, because, sometimes I take others' problems on, and then it negatively impacts me. So I try to, pick my spaces and pick my spots, because, I'm definitely a sponge for things. It's just how I'm wired.
The message, it's a powerful one about when we know that we're not feeling well, if there's something we know, we become aware of, we should do something about it. And I wonder why we don't. Because I do also remember, I have to say, I had, I think, a respiratory kind of issue. My breathing wasn't right. It was about some years back. And I never went to the doctor or anything for it. I went to meditation. I would do my spiritual practices, not wishing that God out there would heal me, because I don't believe that. But it was just like in trust that whatever was happening, it would take care of itself. It would come and go. Like the feelings, they would come and they'll go. And then went away. But who knows? What about if it didn't? So now I'm becoming, actually, it's a message for me as well. A lot of times I'm not a doctor person, and I usually don't rush to the doctor when I feel something. I just wait to go away.
Yeah.
So is that really one of the main messages that you have for us, Melissa? Because that's the one that's touching me. I know the listeners will probably find other messages.
I would say, we're all not doctor people, especially today when in some cases it takes 6 months to get to a specialist. But, if something is overt, something is, consistent, perhaps getting worse by the day, you have to just, take the plunge and go. I can say this all day long, but in October of 2020, I wound up almost dying because, I have a high pain threshold. I have a million GI issues, and, stomach pain to me is an everyday event. And, I had stomach pain, and, I was just, I just told my husband, I'm just going to go to sleep. It'll be fine in the morning. And, he kind of forced me to go to the ER, and thank God he did, because I had a GI bleed that it was a rare thing that happened, but my stomach basically flipped and tore off my spleen. I didn't do anything to do it. It just happened.
Yeah.
But had I not gone to the doctor, I wouldn't be speaking to you today. So, there's things like that, you kind of get lucky. But then I know other people that, in my opinion, go too much, right? And it's almost like an addiction. The doctor's got a pill or a treatment or a this or that's going to make you feel better. And in some cases, it does more harm than make things better.
Yes, that's a very empowering message, and true one that's true to me. Yeah, so I do think the same way. So for emergencies, conventional medicine is very helpful, right? Emergencies. We don't have to go to the doctors for anything that we feel. Like in my case, I just wait to see if it will go away.
Right.
And sometimes I wait a lot, a month. But I watch. I'm very much aware of my body. Maybe that's another piece that it's missing with so many of us, that we are not aware of our own bodies. We're not listening to it.
Yeah. And some people also avoid too, because, maybe they don't have insurance, or maybe they have a high deductible. So, money comes in as well. Recently,
True.
I have great insurance, but recently I was asked for an interview, and I did work 20 years in the reinsurance industry. So I do understand insurance speak, and primary insurance and property and casualty and all that stuff. And, they asked me about, my thoughts on the cost of healthcare and the value of going to doctors. And I'm lucky because my husband has excellent benefits, but not everybody does. So I researched, as if I didn't have benefits, the cost. I researched what you would call a gold plan versus what you would call a bronze plan. And there's so many differences in between. And the cost, some people are going to avoid going to an emergency room or going to a GP or a specialist just because they can't afford it. And that's when, things go south as well.
I love when you talk about research. So that's another empowering piece, which
Yeah.
is always doing our own work before we go
Yes.
to doctors and all. So we don't rely on their opinion for everything. Like in the case of chemotherapy, I interviewed somebody here, which I think was her mother too, died from that and suffered so much before. So in her book, she really, in the end, she said that I would never do that again. If I had a choice now, no chemotherapy.
Well, they've said sometimes the treatment is worse than the disease. Like in my mom's case, in the book I read about what they called cleanup chemo for the microscopic after she had surgery. And, it was 4 days inpatient. And my sister texted me and I was at work and the text said terrible. So I had a great employer. I left work. But before I left, I Googled the medication my mom was on and I printed it, brought it to the hospital, all the side effects. And my mother had every side effect of toxicity except coma and death. And I called the oncologist because it was a holiday weekend. And I said, I need you to get here before it was a Friday, before you leave for the weekend. I think my mom's toxic. And, he came, he took one look at her and said she was fine. And then he looked at me and he told me to stay off the internet. So the next day, we befriended so many nurses there because they were wonderful. And the nurse called me and she said, Missy, you need to get here. This isn't the Connie that I know. And I'm supposed to hang another bag, but I'm not going to hang it till you get here. And that's what I mean about how important nurses are. And I got there and it was terrible. And one of his backups came in, the oncologist backups came in. My father came, my sister was there, again, we had a little bit of white coat syndrome where, whatever they say has to be factual and, they're the experts, which in many cases they are. But in my gut, she was toxic. So to make a long story short, my mother agreed to another round of treatment. After that happened, we couldn't leave. We had to sleep there. And on Monday, things were so bad. The priest came in a couple times. It was terrible what she was going through. And the original doctor that I called on Friday came in and he looked at me and he said, "You're right. She's toxic." And, with a few choice words that I won't say on the phone, I looked these up and I'm not a doctor. I just Googled it and I took one look at her and I knew. And with that poisoning, it took 2 weeks of her life. She doesn't even remember it. It was 2 weeks of her life that went by where she was like ready to die. Like at least 4 or 5 times I called my husband from the city to come up and, she survived it. But after that happened, any positivity, any jump in her step, any thoughts of beating the disease were gone. It was after that, I think she gave up. So, research is a good thing. Like, you're never going to take the place of a doctor, but being able to understand things and including the medications that you're on and what they're for and what the possible side effects are, it's no, to me, it's no different than if you're buying a television or a computer. You're going to research what's the best computer to buy with the best processor. Why wouldn't you do that about your body and your medications,
In the book, you mentioned trust your instincts, trust your intuition. When you looked at your mother and you knew something was not right.
Yeah, I knew. I had a gut feeling. And, even when he told me to stay off the internet, I was not happy with that response. But, I just knew. And when the nurse called me the next morning, it was just horrible. But you have to trust your gut. Your gut's not always going to be right, but a lot of times it is, especially, like another thing with healthcare, and this is just the reality of it. Like if you see Dr. X every day, he knows you. He knows you when you're happy. He knows your facial expressions. He knows how you act. He knows your personality. When they have a bunch of people that are in a group and they are backup for this doctor, they don't know you. They don't know what you look like when you're healthy, when you're happy, when something's wrong. That all of that is part of the person that if the patient can't do it, it's up to the family or an advocate to help them understand the big picture because it's critical.
Yes, that's a beautiful point.
Yeah.
Because of the level of connectivity, of connection, right? You're the closest to
Right.
that person, so you know. And yeah, that has been lost, right, Melissa? I'm not familiar with the medical system, but it seems like now they have different doctors to see you when you go to the
Oh, yeah.
hospital clinic. There's this replacement. Yeah, I don't know how that works, but it seems to me like it has become a lot more, let's say, watered down. The whole.
Oh, God, yeah. I have a physician I've seen for over 20 years. And, he told me a couple months ago, he's like, Missy, he goes, I have to see a patient every 10 minutes. He goes, I don't get to know their name. I don't know their background. It's kind of like a revolving door. And the doctors are aware of it, but, they have numbers that they have to hit from their bosses. So it's just a system that is just in a lot of trouble today. And the pandemic has just, I think the pandemic didn't cause this stuff, but it definitely made things worse.
Yes, it amplified a problem that was
Exactly.
already there, right?
Right, exactly.
Which fundamentally, from my perspective, is that lack of self-care, self-love, self-awareness. We're just giving our power away. And then we are relying on everything else but our own selves, our own inner wisdom. That's why I love when you say that in the book about trusting your instincts, your own intuition. That is crucial. But then in this case, you had, let's say, resistance from the system as well. So you trust your intuition, you know it's right, but then you have this wall in front of you of professions saying that you're not right. That they have to do it their way.
Right. Kind of stay in your lane. That was pretty much what I was told. Yeah.
So that's a tough one. And I have been there one time with a friend of mine who had issues, medical issues. I had to go with him, and I knew, because I'm very intuitive, I knew what was wrong with him. Yeah, because I knew him more than the doctor. But then they would push me away every time. Like they would just brush it off, and then you don't know anything.
Right.
And I felt that with my husband's father too in New York when he passed away. He stayed in the hospital for a while, and I remember feeling very disempowered there. Although I was very empowered in my own house, in my own body, my own spirit. But then when I just walked through that door, there's something about hospitals that automatically makes you feel so small.
Yeah. Small and helpless,
Yes, right. And that might be this controlling factor, because they're trying to control so much that it becomes this very contracted and comfortable energy in there. I have to say energy because it's a feeling for me when I walk into places. And almost like you can't really say much. You have no say. Now you are, you feel helpless, right? That's how I felt with my husband's father. And then his family, and I saw that everybody felt the same way. They're just kind of looking at the doctors for everything. He died in the hospital, which I would not let that happen if it was my father. I would bring him home and do the whole, the last days. He should, I really believe that we need to honor more the human life in a sense of living with love and self-care. And then in the end, also have this beautiful celebration in a way of transition. Oh, okay, it's time to move on. Who knows where, but it's interesting, the whole experience. We should honor that. That's how I feel. So, but then they were advised not to. He had to be in the hospital, and then the family, they just accepted everything.
Yeah, see, that's my dad, when, we tried to engage, we did engage hospice and palliative care 4 days before he passed. And the unfortunate thing is that although we told them what his desires were and wants were to go at home, they would not let us. They didn't have the staff. They didn't have the coordination. All that stuff didn't work out. We even had a ride. He was a volunteer fireman for 50 years. So they even offered to pick him up in the ambulance, but it just didn't work out.
How interesting. So that's the sense of control again. It goes back to control. Right?
Yeah.
There's so much of that happening there. I really wish for this to, and maybe that's why I do what I do. Like I listen to so many, I do a lot of sharing, promoting of these messages, because it's coming from a place of freedom, of individual personal empowerment. That, of course, in the end will expand to universal power, because then we just share the beautiful essence of who we are. In a sense of everything that we practice, we just kind of expand that to the outside. So I really believe that I know we are all connected, but there is something about becoming independent in a sense of knowing our individuality, knowing what we have to do for ourselves, that it's crucial for happiness and inner peace. But it's something that's still to be learned, I guess, Melissa.
Yeah.
We're a long ways away here.
Yeah.
So let's see, we're almost at the end with the interview, and I have so many notes here that I didn't mention. The things to learn, the lessons that you have learned, there's so many things that you mentioned. You mentioned trust, but you say verify.
Yes.
Trust, but verify.
Yep.
So don't blindly trust anything when you want.
Yeah, no, I mean, it comes down to like, even, again, it's the closer thing to me is what I went through in December is, right, today's day and age, you have patient portals. Everybody's medical records are basically electronic. So you have access to them. Even if you need to ask for help, get access to those records and look at them. You're not going to understand everything they say. You're not going to understand handwritten notes a lot of times. But if, say, for example, you're looking at labs, you can see if, I'll make it up, the range is supposed to be between 1 and 10, and you're at 55. That tells you that something's wrong. As far as trust and, verify, I mean, we had, a lot of situations where, I questioned some of the care that my dad and mom got. And ultimately I was right. And I'm not saying that to brag. I'm saying that because they're understaffed and these things happen. And unfortunately they happen more and more every day. And, the only way that you can help is to empower yourself by, getting access to these records.
Yeah, I love the message there again. It goes back to empowerment, self-empowerment, because knowledge does take a lot of the fear too. It makes us feel completely different when we know. Although in your case, even though you had so much knowledge and you trusted your own instinct, your own intuition, you still had that wall. But that's a different problem. You did what you had to do, your own work.
We did the best we could. Like, we really wanted to honor my dad's desires and needs and what he wanted. And I do, in a way, feel like we failed him in that. But I also, my sister and I we had lost our power. I mean, we begged, we pleaded, I literally stalked, the social worker and the different doctors, and, it just didn't work out. I'm not the first or last person that's going to happen to.
Unfortunately, yes. Sadly, right? Sadly.
Yep.
Thank you so much for your courage, Melissa. I love that you made, it's almost like, it actually is not almost like, it is transforming pain into meaning, into purpose. That's what I see and hear in your voice.
Yeah. I mean, the other one thing I wanted to do is, again, because I have a psychology degree, in the beginning, I write a letter to my mother, and it basically talks about my grief and how I handled it. And, in my opinion, I didn't handle it well at all. And I did things that I knew better, but I wanted to be transparent to the reader to say that, even someone with a fancy degree that has treated depressed patients, that has worked in a psychiatric emergency room or step down houses, can slip up too. And that was me, and it took a lot of self-sabotage for me to, say, hey, I can't do this anymore, or I'm going to be right there with her.
Yes, that's another powerful message about being human, that we are all humans.
Yeah.
Thank you for saying that too, reminding me of that too. I saw that, of course, the very beginning of your book. And I made too many notes. I think that's why I was all over the place today here. I apologize.
That's okay.
If I went all
That's
wrong.
how my brain works, so it's fine.
Oh, good. So there's something else you said, beautifully said. You say, life can change quickly, so try to enjoy it. Be grateful for what you have and make memories. That is so true. I love that. Yeah,
that is so huge. And I think about, even anybody, my parents, other people, loved ones, cousins, acquaintances, you name it. Because before December 13th, my life was going pretty well. I had no issues until, I found out my dad's body was filling up with water and his, the pump in his heart was failing. So, I mean, that's something that, while I knew he had that diagnosis for years, he had been compliant on his meds, not drinking alcohol, doing everything he's supposed to do for all this time. I mean, the normal diagnosis of congestive heart failure usually get 5 to 10 years. My dad got 19. So for that, I'm grateful. But it just shows you how quickly things can change. And, we don't have endless time. We just don't.
Yes. I love the gratitude piece in there too, because that can change everything. When we appreciate the things that are here, that are making us feel good and happy. So that can be amplified too by gratitude. There's something else you said that caught my attention. You said it is easier to distract ourselves and stay busy, to block the pain with pills than to deal with what is killing you inside.
Yep, that's exactly what I did. When I had a fantastic employer, and the entire time my mom was sick, my executive vice president came up to me and said, "You know what, Missy, nobody wants to be where you are. If you need to go at any time, go. You need to take off. You need to leave early. We'll sweep up after you." And I was in a management position, so it wasn't that easy to do, but I had a great employer.
Yes,
and so after she passed, I was a hot mess, and I was offered to take 6 months mental health leave with pay. Yeah. But, I felt like because my job was so good to me while she was sick, that I kind of owed them, the courtesy and the respect to not take off that 6 months and work, because, I was creating more work for others if I was out. And that was probably one of the biggest mistakes that I made, because had I taken that time, I probably wouldn't have wound up in such a bad mental health, physical health situation as I did. I should have taken the rope that they gave me, and I didn't. And it wasn't a pride thing. It was more like I felt like they had given me enough, but I really should have taken them up on that offer.
That's has to do with saying no and saying yes. That sometimes we have a hard time receiving love, right?
Yeah.
For me, has been an experience, a sad one, of not accepting love, and then also having a hard time saying no when I feel like saying no.
Yeah.
So those are lessons that we all need to be reminded of too, Melissa. Not just to learn, but we need to be reminded of.
Right.
You also said it is a hard lesson to learn that you often do not realize how much you love someone until they're gone. And then you said we all handled our loss differently. I don't believe in the norms of grief. I think we are all managing the best we can, holding on to beautiful memories. So I would love to hear your message on grief.
We have in psychology, we learn there's 5 stages of grief, right? And you're supposed to go through them in a specific order, and they have specific attributes and all that kind of stuff. In fact, the DSM-5 just added long-term grief diagnosis in the, depression category. As far as me, I think out of my immediate family, I probably handled it the worst. And to me, there's no textbook on how you handle stuff. I just lost my dad December 30th, and I've handled it 1,000 times better than I handled my mom. Some of that is growth, getting older and just understanding that it's a part of life. The other part of it, just to be transparent, is I'm still in the anger stage, and just because of the hospital issues, but and that's sort of blocking, I think, the reality of it. But it definitely hits me every once in a while, but as far as, the difference between my mom and my dad, it's just night and day. I'm just stronger now. And I also, when my mom passed, I had a toddler. Now I have a preteen. So I have to rise for him. I have to show him that, this is life, and this is what happens, and this is how you deal with it. And it's okay to cry, but, life has to go on. And, you have to think of the good memories. My son wanted to go to the hospital to see my dad the last week of his life, and I couldn't let him because it was so bad. And I wanted him to remember how he saw him at home laughing and, looking well. And I didn't want to have him have the horrible memories that I have, because he's way too young for that. And quite frankly, nobody should see that. It's just, it's no fun. And it's memories that burn into your brain that are hard to get rid of.
That's traumatic, isn't it? It
Yeah.
becomes a traumatic experience.
Yep. Yeah, I never thought I'd be in this space again. I really didn't. But I am, and you know what? I don't want to sound like a victim, because there's plenty of people that I've talked to, again, and even globally, that have been in the same space. It's and the only thing I can do is just to I blog all the time, and I post stuff all the time, give tips, frequently asked questions, all that kind of thing, just to try and help others navigate their way through the healthcare system. Because I don't hate doctors, I don't hate nurses or any of that. I just think that they're as pressed as we are, and some of their environments are not healthy for them either, and their work-life balances and stuff like that. And I don't think nobody goes to school all those years to be a doctor or a nurse to be bad at it. When mistakes happen, to me, it's system overload, it's C-suite problems, and that type of thing.
Yes, right. That's the humanness in you.
Yeah.
That's being empathetic, that's seeing the other, right? Although we know that in some cases, unfortunately, sadly, I have to say that we do meet some human beings who have lost touch with their own feelings.
It did take me a lot. Like, I actually read a book written by an oncologist to be able to try and get rid of some of my anger for the one that treated my mom, because, I thought about it and I said, how, imagine the job every day, probably 10 times a day, you have to tell another human being that they have a disease that there's a high probability that they may not survive. And if they survive it, the treatment is going to be very uncomfortable. Imagine having to do that all day, every day. It's not an easy job. So it took me years to be able to work through my own feelings to develop that kind of empathy in the role.
Yes, right. Knowing that the environment can change people, right?
Mm-hmm.
They might have a good intention, but then they're impacted in a different way by the environment. So true. Thank you so much again, Melissa, for your genuine presence. It's coming from this raw space of feelings, of being a human. And this is what it is to be human. That's the human life, the human experience that we try so much to suppress and to hide. But here it is.
Yeah.
I love that. And I love 1,000 times that you have made purpose and meaning out of this. And you're teaching others to walk toward knowledge and empowerment, and not feeling disempowered as the system might innocently try to make us feel. And so you're building us to become stronger within so we can trust ourselves more through knowledge. That's what's needed the most at this time, I believe.
Yeah, I agree. Knowledge is definitely power. I mean, don't get me wrong, there are some bad players. There's bad players in every occupation, but the majority of them are not. It's just they're a product of their environment.
Yes, right. Or they're sometimes just believing their superiors, people above them, too much. They're giving too much of their power, of their own intuition to them too. And that's something to be reevaluated. But that's the vision that I personally have professionally too, doing what I do, that we can tap into our own power, our own hearts a lot more. So I have a few more questions for you, the ending questions. But before that, Melissa, would you like to add anything that you left unsaid or read a passage in your book?
No, I would just say that, given what I just went through, if you have a loved one that's in the hospital, or even yourself, don't be afraid to ask the tough questions. Don't be afraid that you might make a mistake. Make sure you try and become the best advocate for yourself. And it's not easy out there. And, to people that still have parents that are living, maybe the relationship is strained for some reason, definitely try and patch it up, because there's going to become a day where they're not going to be around anymore. And then you don't want to live a life of regret. And, I would just say there's some things in this world that you can control, other things that you can't, and just, try your best to get good at the things that you can control.
Yes, beautifully said. Right. What do you love most about the human experience?
I'm very family orientated.
Yes.
I'm very loyal. My husband, I believe it or not, I married my high school sweetheart. We started dating at 15.
Yeah.
He's a very loyal person. As far as a human experience, just spending time with others, spending time with your family, laughing, making memories, leaving your comfort zone and trying things that you thought you would never do, all of that. Just, even sometimes, I used to work in downtown Manhattan, just people watching, you could spend, it's just, that kind of thing. There's just so many things that we can enjoy.
Yeah, simple things, right, Melissa?
Yeah.
Small, simple things. I agree. Beautiful. Thank you so much again for your presence. And before we say goodbye for today, where's the best place to find more information about you and your book?
You can go to my website at www.melissamullamphy.com. I try and blog at least daily from there. It's also available on Amazon. It's also available at Barnes & Noble, Google Books, Apple, wherever books are sold, you can basically get it. I might even have a second one in me after this past couple months.
Yeah, please keep me informed.
Yes.
And I'll have the link of the Amazon link to your book and the website on this podcast profile. Thank you so much again, Melissa, and we'll talk soon. Bye for now.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for listening. To learn more about Melissa Mullamphy and her work, please visit melissamullamphy.com.
To learn more about this podcast, please visit fitforjoy.org/podcast. Thank you again for listening, and bye for now.